Our list starts with a harrowing incident involving an overloaded plane that used every inch of the runway before barely lifting off at the last second. The aircraft struggled to gain altitude, scraping along the ground and even collecting some bushes during takeoff. The heavy load pushed the plane to its limits, making it difficult for the pilot to maintain control. Through careful maneuvering, the pilot was able to get the aircraft airborne just in time, narrowly avoiding a catastrophe. This dramatic event underscores the critical importance of adhering to weight limits in aviation. A Boeing 747 faced a dramatic challenge during takeoff when it tore up the terrain next to the runway. The runway had recently undergone maintenance, with new asphalt laid down, but the immense power of the 747's engines overwhelmed the surface. As the aircraft powered down the runway, chunks of dirt and debris were sent flying, creating a hazardous situation. The sheer weight and force of the jumbo jet were unmatched by the newly laid surface, but fortunately, the aircraft took off without further incident. This mishap highlighted the need for more rigorous runway maintenance standards. An F-15 experienced a terrifying moment when flames erupted from its engine during takeoff. The cause was a compressor stall, a serious malfunction that led to bright flames shooting out of the exhaust, creating a fireball visible to those watching from the ground. The scene was both shocking and dangerous, but the pilot managed to stay calm under pressure, successfully aborting the takeoff and bringing the plane to a stop. Despite the frightening visuals, no injuries were reported, and the event served as a reminder of the importance of quick decision-making in emergency situations. During takeoff in India, a Boeing 747 encountered a bird strike, a common but dangerous hazard for aircraft. The bird collided with the plane's engine, causing loud thuds and vibrations. Bird strikes can lead to severe engine damage, and this incident was no different. The pilot immediately assessed the situation and decided to return to the airport for an emergency landing. Although the plane sustained some damage, the skilled crew landed safely, avoiding a major disaster. This event emphasized the ever-present risk wildlife poses to aircraft, especially during takeoff and landing near airports. A Boeing 737 had a dramatic encounter during takeoff from Iceland when it suffered a tail strike. The impact produced a distinct scraping sound, indicating that the plane's tail had made contact with the runway. Tail strikes can severely compromise an aircraft's structural integrity, especially when taking off at high speeds. Despite this dangerous situation, the pilots assessed the aircraft's condition and felt confident enough to continue flying to their destination. While the aircraft performed without issue, the event raised questions about the importance of double-checking weight distribution and takeoff angles in future flights. An An Airbus A330 narrowly avoided disaster when it struck a light pole while taxiing before takeoff. The plane's wing clipped the pole, causing minor damage but sparing the aircraft and its passengers from serious harm. The incident occurred as the plane was being directed to the runway, and poor communication between ground crew and pilots likely contributed to the close call. While no one was hurt, this accident highlighted the dangers of obstacles on the tarmac and stressed the importance of clear instructions and careful attention to surroundings during ground maneuvers. A Boeing 727, overloaded and pushed to the limit, barely managed to take off in time, sending a spray of debris onto people standing at the end of the runway. The aircraft's engines, overworked from the extra weight, churned up dust and stones, creating a hazardous situation for those nearby. This event underscored the dangers of overloading, not only to the aircraft, but to those on the ground as well. In response, the airline conducted a thorough review of its loading procedures to prevent similar situations in the future, ensuring better weight distribution and safer takeoff conditions. In a dramatic series of events, a Boeing 777 had to abort its takeoff, leading to a unique situation where the aircraft literally drifted across the runway. The pilot applied full rudder control, but due to a mechanical issue, the plane began skidding to the side. It was only through the pilot's quick thinking and skilled handling that the aircraft was brought back under control, avoiding a complete runway excursion that could have resulted in severe damage. The situation demonstrated both the skill of the crew and the importance of proper aircraft maintenance to prevent similar issues. A Boeing 737 faced a dangerous moment during takeoff when it exceeded the safe bank angle, triggering the aircraft's bank angle alarm. The plane began to tilt too sharply to one side, which could have led to a loss of control at a critical phase of flight. Reacting immediately, the pilots corrected the aircraft's altitude and angle, stabilizing the flight and ensuring a safe ascent. The incident underscored the importance of closely monitoring aircraft instruments during takeoff, a time when even small deviations from the normal flight path can result in significant risks. Another Boeing 737 faced serious challenges during takeoff when it struggled to lift off due to being overloaded. The excessive weight caused the plane to use nearly the entire length of the runway before finally gaining enough speed to leave the ground. The aircraft barely made it into the air, with the nose of the plane lifting off just in time to avoid disaster. The near miss prompted a detailed review of the aircraft's weight and balance calculations to ensure safer operating practices going forward. This incident highlights the ongoing importance of strict adherence to weight limits in aviation. In this first incident, an Airbus A340 barely managed to take off before running out of runway. With full throttle and passengers holding their breath, the massive aircraft struggled to lift its nose, using every bit of pavement available. At the last second, the pilot skillfully pulled the plane into the air, narrowly avoiding disaster. The close call highlights the importance of accurate weight distribution and thorough pre-flight checks. Fortunately, the plane cleared the end of the runway in time, but it served as a nerve-wracking reminder of how critical takeoff calculations are. A Boeing 757 had a terrifying incident when its right engine experienced repeated compressor stalls during takeoff from Spain. Flames shot out from the engine, illuminating the sky as the aircraft battled to stay airborne. Compressor stalls can lead to engine failure, but in this case, the pilots managed to divert the plane safely to a nearby airport. Emergency protocols were executed flawlessly, and although the passengers were shaken, the plane landed without any injuries. This incident demonstrated the dangers of engine stalls and how quick thinking can avert disaster in the skies. While taking off from Amsterdam, a DHL Airbus A300 encountered a bird strike. The unfortunate bird collided with the plane's engine, causing noticeable vibrations and noise. Bird strikes pose a significant hazard to aircraft, particularly during takeoff and landing when engines are at full power. Despite the incident, the pilots decided to continue their flight after consulting with the control tower. Fortunately, no significant damage occurred, and the plane safely reached its destination. This event serves as another example of how wildlife can interfere with aviation, emphasizing the need for strict wildlife management near airports. A Boeing 747 was ready for takeoff from Miami when, during the takeoff roll, one of its engines suddenly failed. Thick smoke billowed from the engine, forcing the pilot to abort the takeoff and bring the plane to a halt. Aborting takeoff is always a risky maneuver, but the pilot's swift actions ensured that no passengers were injured, and the aircraft was safely returned to the gate for repairs. This engine failure highlighted the importance of conducting regular and thorough maintenance checks before flights to prevent such incidents from turning into full-blown disasters. In a heart-stopping moment, an overloaded plane barely managed to take off at the very last second, using every inch of the runway and more. The aircraft strained under the excessive weight, struggling to gain enough speed to leave the ground. As the plane's nose finally lifted into the air, you'd think it'd finally fly. But no, it comes right back down before finally leaving the ground. The takeoff was dangerously close to failure, and the event led to a comprehensive review of loading procedures to ensure that such an overload would not happen again. It's a reminder of how critical weight limits are in aviation. A Boeing 757 faced a catastrophic engine failure mid-takeoff, causing unbelievably large puffs of smoke to erupt from its right engine. The fire immediately caught the attention of the crew and airport personnel. Firefighters were quick to respond, and the aircraft, which was taking off from John Wayne Airport in California, was brought to a halt before any further damage occurred. Engine fires are rare but incredibly dangerous, and this incident serves as a testament to the importance of rapid response teams and the need for pilots to be ready to abort takeoff at a moment's notice.
Look at this video. That's smoke pouring from an engine on the right side of a Delta Airlines plane. This is at John Wayne.
An Airbus A330 was taking off when it encountered a flock of birds, resulting in a sudden bird strike. The impact caused immediate vibrations in the engine, leading the pilots to declare an emergency and return to the airport. This incident was particularly dangerous as the plane was heavily loaded with fuel for a long-haul flight from Dublin to Chicago. The crew had to carefully manage an overweight landing as the plane hadn't had time to burn off its fuel. Despite the complications, the aircraft landed safely, demonstrating the pilot's skill and calm in dealing with emergencies. In this close call, a C-5M Galaxy military transport plane took off too slowly, forcing an Airbus A330 right behind it to perform a go-around. The near collision happened as the Galaxy lumbered into the sky, leaving the commercial jet with too little space to safely follow. The Airbus pilots acted quickly, pulling up to avoid a disastrous accident. A go-around is a common maneuver in aviation, but when executed under such tense circumstances, it becomes a high-stakes event. The quick reflexes of the A330 pilots helped avoid a catastrophe, but it served as a stark reminder of spacing requirements during takeoff. This Douglas MD-82 was only centimeters away from disaster as it tried to take off. The plane increased its speed on the runway, trying to gain momentum for the flight ahead. But as the nose lifted into the air, the rear of the plane bent so dangerously close to the ground that it was mere centimeters away from having a tail strike. Luckily, the pilot was able to balance the plane and successfully lift it off the ground. This Boeing 757 raced the runway and then did a beautiful takeoff, having no problems at all. The challenge came when the plane was already in the air. The right engine was on fire. Airport authorities quickly contacted the points aboard the plane, and they had to do a go-round, landing back at the airport safely.
35 Yankee 1 into runway 06 right.
Officer Yankee 1 into 6 right.
The HMS Queen Elizabeth is the flagship aircraft carrier of the Royal Navy. In November 2021, while stationed in the Mediterranean, a pilot prepared to launch a 100 million British pound sterling F-35 fighter jet. As the jet sped toward the ramp, it failed to gain enough thrust for takeoff. In an instant, the pilot had no choice but to eject, deploying his parachute as the jet plunged into the ocean. Ejector seats, the last defense in such situations, saved his life. A similar story involved an American pilot of a Grumman A-6, who also ejected after engine failure, suffering severe spinal compression.
Knowing he needs to make an emergency landing, the pilot jettisons the fuel tanks and practice bombs. They hit the ground and exploded in the airbase below.
A Boeing 737, taking off with a strong headwind, rotated much later than expected, dangerously close to the runway's end. The aircraft's nose lifted at the last moment, just before the tarmac ran out. This near miss occurred at Norwich Airport, leaving onlookers tense as the plane barely cleared the edge. Headwinds, though helpful for generating lift, can sometimes cause unexpected delays in takeoff, adding to the drama and risk, especially on shorter runways like this one. Fortunately, the 737 managed to ascend into the sky, avoiding a potentially disastrous outcome. An Airbus A330 was forced to perform a go-around after descending at a faster than usual rate during the flare. As the aircraft approached the runway for landing, the rapid descent became difficult to control, causing the plane to pull up at the last moment to avoid a hard touchdown. The flare, a crucial phase of landing where pilots gradually reduce the descent rate, was executed too quickly, making the situation unsafe. The decision to go around allowed the crew to stabilize the approach for a second attempt, ensuring a safer landing on the next pass. A Boeing 767 blew one of its tires during takeoff from Detroit. The pilots, already committed to the takeoff, couldn't abort and proceeded with the flight. Despite the tire failure, the aircraft continued its journey to the intended destination. Upon nearing arrival, the crew declared an emergency due to the blown tire, preparing for a potentially difficult landing. However, thanks to the pilot's skill and preparation, the aircraft touched down safely without further incident, ensuring the passengers' safety. Tire blowouts during takeoff can be challenging, but proper handling and emergency protocols prevented a disaster. An Airbus A321 had to abort its takeoff after encountering a problem with its instruments. As the aircraft tried to accelerate down the runway, the pilots noticed irregularities on the wings, signaling a potential malfunction. The weather was also not favorable. Prioritizing safety, they made the critical decision to abort the takeoff, bringing the aircraft to a halt before reaching takeoff speed. Instrument issues can pose serious risks during flight, and by swiftly acting to address the problem, the crew prevented a possible emergency in the air. After safely returning to the gate, maintenance teams were called to investigate and resolve the technical fault. An Airbus A350 made an impressively short takeoff from Minneapolis. As the aircraft accelerated down the runway, it quickly reached rotation speed, lifting off much sooner than expected. The A350, known for its powerful engines and aerodynamic design, showcased its efficiency in this rapid takeoff. Despite the short runway roll, the departure was smooth and controlled, demonstrating the aircraft's As this powerful Airbus A330 prepared for takeoff from Manchester, the aircraft accelerated smoothly down the runway. But just seconds into the flight, disaster struck. The right engine erupted with an explosive force, shaking the plane and jolting everyone on board. Without hesitation, the pilots sprang into action, skillfully aborting the takeoff. They brought the aircraft to an emergency stop, halting the terrifying situation before it escalated further. After a thorough inspection, the cause was discovered. A turbine blade had detached, leading to the critical engine failure. The crew's quick thinking averted what could have been a catastrophic event.
It's very shortly if you want to speak to them on 121.6.
Yeah, we've got that up, just waiting for them to attach.
Lovely.
This Airbus A350 strains to lift off the runway, struggling due to the loss of one of its two powerful engines, reducing its usual power output by half. The aircraft seems to crawl forward, battling against the immense pressure as it tries to gain altitude. The sound of the remaining engine working overtime fills the air. However, it was clarified that it was a controlled scenario at the Airbus factory, a crucial test designed to simulate an engine failure and gauge the aircraft's ability to respond to such emergencies under these challenging conditions. This next clip shows a very disturbing moment where a plane was all set for takeoff, but something happened that left the passengers in shock. From the window, we can see a man climbing onto the plane's wing to join the flight. There's no imagining what would have happened if the plane had really taken off. In a terrifying moment at Fort Lauderdale Airport, a jet with 101 people on board burst into flames just before takeoff. The Dynamic Airways plane, bound for Venezuela, was spotted leaking fuel by another pilot. Moments later, the fuel ignited, sending passengers into a frantic escape via emergency slides as thick smoke billowed from the burning engine.
Clouds of smoke into the air. The moments captured by video. Frantic passengers taking emergency chutes, running from the flaming jetliner to safety.
Despite the chaos, the crew remained calm, guiding passengers to safety. 21 people were injured, mainly during the evacuation. Investigators later discovered a small fuel leak between the engine and wing, raising questions about the aircraft's maintenance procedures.
21 injured, most when they were evacuating.
At North Perry Airport in Pembroke Pines, a tragic plane crash claimed one life and left 2 others seriously injured. The small Cessna 172, which crashed during takeoff around noon, veered off the runway before erupting into flames.
Plane crashed moments after takeoff in Pembroke Pines. Happened around noon on the east side of North Perry Airport.
Sky 10 captured the harrowing scene as rescue teams pulled survivors from the wreckage.
Another 2 had to be extricated and taken to Memorial Regional Medical Center with serious injuries.
With one victim pronounced dead at the scene and the injured rushed to Memorial Regional Center. The aircraft, from a local flight school, experienced a catastrophic failure moments after engines accelerated. The cause of the crash remains under investigation by the NTSB, with a preliminary report expected in 15 days. The military plane had barely ascended into the sky when disaster unfolded. Flames erupted from its right engine, and the aircraft started to shudder violently. The pilot, struggling to regain control, faced a losing battle as the plane wobbled and veered off its intended path. You could see the plumes of smoke trailing behind as it dipped lower, its descent rapid and terrifying.
Ё-моё! Ё-моё! Ну, в принципе, у них 4, один-то должен.
With no time to correct the course, the plane plummeted, slamming into the ground in a fiery explosion. The roar of the crash echoing across the landscape, leaving a thick cloud of smoke behind. In a heart-stopping moment, a plane that was going to make an emergency landing found itself at a crossroads because of another plane. As the landing plane approached the ground, the other plane was just taking off. It looked like there would be a head-on collision, but luckily both pilots managed to maintain a distance from each other, and the landing plane was forced to cancel, even though its wing was on fire. Watch as this heavy airplane nearly crashed into a neighborhood during takeoff. The plane had gone too slow and nearly overshot its runway, so it was a bit difficult to gain momentum by crashing into a few houses. Luckily, the crash did not happen, and the plane finally gained altitude and sped away, probably leaving behind people heaving sighs of relief. This next video is not something you see every day. The clip shows a plane racing in the runway to take off, and right behind it, another plane is swooping in. Just seconds after the first plane leaves the runway, the second one lands. From another angle, it would seem like the plane was racing after the first one. It was really a sight to behold, a rare moment of taking off and landing at the same time.